Hello and welcome to Easter Eggs right here on Hyper RPG. I'm your host as always, Scott Shuken. Today's topic, Kickstarter games. With me to my left is Mitch Gitelman, studio head of Harebrained Schemes. Has worked on such games as Shadowrun, Battletech, and Necropolis, which we're all excited for over here. Across from me is Matthew Moore, game designer of Bring Your Own Book, who's currently working on Marvel's Avengers Alliance 2 for a little company you may have heard of called Disney. They do some things.
I'm going to Wikipedia that.
To my right is Ryan Macklin, game designer and publisher. He's worked on games like Fate Core and Pathfinder. Currently the man behind Katanas and Trenchcoats, and working on Unknown Armies a little bit too, right?
Yep.
Well, thank you guys for coming on the show.
I'm excited.
Thanks for having us.
I'm having an allergy attack as we speak, so please bear with me.
We'll get through it.
Yeah.
First, we're, of course, talking about Kickstarters today. I want to remind the chat, of course, you guys can always ask questions. We'll ask the ones that we see and think are good enough. I want to start with Ryan here to my right, though, because you have a Kickstarter going right now.
I do. I've got a Kickstarter, as you mentioned, called Katanas and Trenchcoats, which is sort of... I've got a few different pitches, but one of my favorite is just imagine if the goth role-playing of the 90s never really ended, and for some of us it didn't. I also worked on game like Mage the Ascension and some of the other games sort of in there, and I'm like, I just felt like making a silly game about the 90s. Because I watch way too much Portlandia and keep playing games that were published in the 90s.
Did you work on Mage, the original Mage?
I worked on some supplements that came out a few years ago for the original Mage.
Oh, really? Okay.
For four of the Technocracy books.
It's so interesting how our histories entwine. As before the show was starting, we're figuring this out. Right. My business partner used to be Mark Reinhagen,
who
created the World of Darkness. It's just it's really
it is like this messy spaghetti being in games.
That's just a great statement to make, even if you don't know the history of it. Like, you walk up to people and you're like, "Hi, I created the World of Darkness."
Right.
It's nice. It's on his business card, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like if you have any sort of things like that, like, you don't think you start with "Hi," you just like, "Behold me." Right. That's just
Wow, you knew him then.
Right.
I print my resume on black paper.
But yeah, so that's my pitch. It's Immortals and Werebeasts and Car Wizards, because I love the Fast and the Furious movies, all mashed up in a world that really never left the 90s.
Cool. That's Katanas and Trenchcoats, and that's so it's active now. How much longer does the Kickstarter have?
Because it started as an April Fool's joke 2 years ago. I started it this year on April 1st, and it runs through April 30th, and you can check that out at somanykatanas.com/Kickstarter. Because that domain name was not taken until I took it.
Nice.
Good
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought there would be like several squatters on
Oh, no. Now I'm squatting, I guess.
We got to get in on this so many blank.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Just any of the so many blades or knives or anything. Just get corner of the market.
Okay, I'm gonna have
so
to.
many
So as soon
cutting
as we're
materials.
done here, I'm gonna be spending like a couple $100
Right.
on
You should go to my
domains now.
Tumblr, though, which is Fuck Yeah, Katanas and Trenchcoats.
Ah.
I like how chat is probably just like, screw those guys. They're registering.
Yeah,
all
they're
the
going to get
information.
all the domain names.
It'll be
we
like,
just mentioned.
it'll be $500.
Right.
That's a business.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, let's get back to Kickstarter and talk about the process. So in the beginning, when you decide to kickstart a game, a lot of people, it looks like Craigslist, right? If you're not behind the computer, if you're just like, oh, look at all this Kickstarter, it's like, oh, look at all these things. Here, give me some money. But it's a lot more than that. Explain to us kind of the process of Kickstarter and what it's like and how it's different for all of you.
Oh, it's hell. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, all right. So maybe it's a little different for me, because for me it was like a complete side thing. Like,
So what did you kickstart first?
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
I kickstarted a tabletop game. So I'm primarily a digital game designer. I worked at ArenaNet on Guild Wars 2, and then now I work at Disney on Marvel Avengers Alliance properties. So I kind of wanted to do something on the
Sorry,
side.
I just want to touch Disney for a minute. It's pretty cool.
That's okay. I want to touch Harebrained.
Now you own them 5% of what you create for the next 3 years. What have you done?
Yeah, but look at the promotion I'm getting.
So many katanas, Mickey, the .com. So I wanted to do like a tabletop game. I was really excited to do something a little different and a little bit more personal. And so me and an artist who I worked with at ArenaNet, we kickstarted a tabletop game called Bring Your Own Book, which is a game. It's a party game that encourages reading. In fact, you actually have to read in order to score points. And it was sort of more of a hit with the readers than it has been with the tabletop crew, which has been interesting. I was like, I don't know, actually, should this be my first tabletop game? But people loved it, so
That's bad.
yeah. So it was for me. It was like it was different because I've joined a whole lot of Kickstarter communities and forums to like get advice. And a lot of the people I interacted with were like, let me give you advice, but from the perspective of I'm a publisher and like this is my life. Right. And for me, it was like, well, I just want to get this thing out. I just want it to happen, and I don't have the money to make it happen because I'm a game designer. And so I
could tell from our threads.
Exactly.
Wicked threads.
It's promotional wear all the way.
Actually, yes.
This is what we do. It's either this or it's something I got at PAX. So
Somebody
That's
else's
either games you
promotional wear.
make or games you play. That's all you wear.
Ryan, what's your story with
This was just
your wife buy you that?
no. This was just like seemed ridiculously just overwrought enough. So, I tend to buy ridiculously overwrought clothing and then wear it in character as somebody who has very, very bad fashion choice because he's never left the '90s. It's totally in character.
There are worse decades to have never left.
There are that is
And people
Yeah,
who
like
have been
the
holding on a
80s.
lot longer. Yeah, that's
Yeah, live
still
through that
happens
shit.
a lot.
So the
Oh my
80s has
God.
been having a comeback too.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
Come on, so much
I was
neon.com. Let's go.
you keep saying it, they keep going. Like you gotta.
Yeah, all right. I'll pocket them. Anyway, so
give it away all your good ideas.
Oh, anyway, about that Kickstarter.
So yeah, tell us. Bring your own book, right?
So bring your own book. It was basically like I looked at Kickstarter as a way to say, does this need to exist, right? Like, is there a market for this? Which to me is a lot like what crowdfunding is. It's the easy way of like putting the idea out in front of people and saying, look, I can't pay for this unless you want me to pay for it. And sure enough, people loved it and were like, yes, please make that. In fact, 400 times what we originally thought, like it was just
That'll do.
great, 400% of our thing. And we were like, cool, we were happy with 100%. Like I just wanted it to exist. So it was really good. We entered into a competition. We went down to PAX South for their tabletop indie thing. And showed it off to the people there. We launched our Kickstarter that same weekend, which you should not do. I'm just saying, my life was hell for a week. But it was a good kind of hell because after we were done, we were funded, and then I got to make my game. So I'm really excited about that. It's been very creatively fulfilling. It was it's been a second job, which is its own special brand of crazy, but. Kickstarter for me was an opportunity to make a thing that I wasn't going to get to make through my day job, and that I didn't have the funds to make on my own, to gamble on. Yeah.
Mitch, let's then get your story. How, just to add context to the discussion later, what games have you kickstarted, and how did you come to Kickstarter?
Let's see. I was making a game called Crimson Steam Pirates for the iPad. And thank you. So good.
It's a very touchy episode of Easter eggs.
So be it. And by the way, yes, thank you, Scott. Anyway, my partner Jordan Weissman and I were making a game called Crimson Steam Pirates. And what happened was we made this company, Harebrained Schemes, just to make little mobile games and just to hang out. There were 8 of us in a storage closet that we were renting from gas-powered games. That didn't have running water or anything. You had to walk up and downstairs to get to the toilet and stuff. But, we were young and we were happy. And a couple of things sort of converged simultaneously. One was our lead engineer was like, look at this Kickstarter thing. And there weren't any video games on it at the time.
When about was this?
2011?
All right.
Sounds right.
About 5
Yeah.
years ago?
I don't know anymore. But sure.
Kickstarter, that's ancient past.
Is that right? No, it was about 2011, I think. And
A Kickstarter thing called a calendar.
yes, sorry, I haven't looked that up yet.
I'm gonna
But
kickstart my
he was
memory.
scrolling through it, and he was showing me. He's like, "Here's what Kickstarter is," and I got this twinkle in my eye. He's like, "No." I'm like, "We could kickstart a video game."
So what was his initial reservation? Just like nobody would pay that
He
much
didn't
money
want
for
to
a
do
video game?
any idea that I had at
Oh,
the
it was
time.
because you thought of it?
Well, he was used to my partner is, it's called Harebrained Schemes for a reason, which is we do whatever the hell we want. And so we were in real sort of screw it, let's just do this mode. And so between me and Jordan, we were always coming up with goofy shit. So anyway, that was part of it. And he's like, it'll never work. Of course, he was one of those guys. It'll never work. You can't do video games on Kickstarter. And then we were working with a publisher on so time goes on. I get this idea of like, what if we do Shadowrun on Kickstarter? What if we video the whole thing and make a documentary, that whole bit? And, it'll be awesome. Big grand vision. And then everybody in the studio said to shut up. Shut up. Don't do that. And then we had a publisher for our next game called Strike Fleet Omega, still available on the Android and Google Play stores or whatever the hell they're called. And anyway, and our publisher said, you guys should make Shadowrun. The same week that on Kotaku, they published a list of the top 10 games they wish would come back, and Shadowrun was right there on it. And like,
Gratuitous.
The stars have aligned. And then just around that time, Tim Schafer did his Kickstarter, and everyone was like, "Oh, well, I guess we should do this."
Now gaming is part of Kickstarter.
Yeah, so we did that, and then In Exile, Brian Fargo was doing his at the same time, and we just launched, and our prep lasted all of about a week.
That's it?
This was a different time in Kickstarter. And we were just laying down the grass in front of our feet trying to make a path as we went because we were like third or something. So nobody knew what they were doing. They were just making it up as we went along.
Let's talk about that path. So you said like you have to, when you can't just be like, hey, I want to make this game. Give me money. Kickstarter has
Actually,
some sort
that's
of rules.
exactly what we did.
So back then, was that basically it for Kickstarter? You were just like, I want to sign up and use
What are you
it?
talking about?
I mean, you need to, don't you need to make at least a little bit clear that you're not just some people trying to scam people?
Yeah, we did that. I don't know. That's what Jordan's for. He's just this amazing sock puppet that you can just, get up there. I made Shadowrun and Crimson Skies and HeroClix, and it was great. So, no, that was about it. I don't know. It wasn't that hard.
So there's not a lot of hoops you have to jump through to get onto Kickstarter?
No, we had to be approved by Kickstarter, but we made a goofy video. We made, our main page, and that's all we had. We had no concept art. We had no design doc. We had actually nothing at all except original BattleTech art, or Shadowrun art. Sorry, I don't want to skip ahead. And we just made it based on nostalgia. And so it just, complete luck coupled with, all that history.
Was there a little bit of BS behind it? Was it like, we're going to make this video, and if people like it, we're like, all right, now we have to make this game? Or was it kind of the other way around, where you're like, we don't know if this is going to work, but God, we really want it to, because we just have to make this game?
Well, we liked the idea. We wanted to make it. We originally envisioned it just for tablets, and it was going to be a top-down game. And it was going to be really... I mean, we scoped it for $400,000, not because we were playing the game or anything. We just, with Kickstarter, we just thought, oh, we're just going to have this real simple little game. And then it started exploding, and people are telling us to add stretch goals, and we were just making it up as we went along. And it was complete bullshit, the entire thing.
Right.
Every feature we added, we had come up with the night before. And then when the Kickstarter was over and we had almost $2 million, like, well, I guess we got to make this now. And we just started shaking. Everybody was like, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck.
So for Shadowrun, the Kickstarter process was almost like the development process.
Yes.
Because you were like, okay, well, now we have money for a thing. Let's come up with a thing.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. And the feature set evolved real time.
Mm-hmm. How about you guys? Was your experience kind of like that, where you were like, let's just do this thing? It sounds like Bring Your Own Book was a lot more conceived when it started out.
I was going to say, I'd love to back him up on this, but I didn't have a sock puppet with a famous IP. So,
handy, huh?
yeah, I know, right?
It's a good gig if you can get it.
I wish, if I'd gotten LeVar Burton to be like, the Reading Rainbow game, we would have just been like, well, have the print the money.
Yeah, it's like Steve Martin's old bit about how do you get $1 million tax-free. First, get $1 million. Now.
Exactly. Yeah. No, ours was so we went into it actually we went into it with a print and play. So we already had the game designed and play tested. It was just the production of it that was a thing.
Crazy.
So it ended up being that sort of thing where it was like, we didn't have to prove to the world that the game existed because it existed. So it was just a question of, does it exist in the form that you actually want, which is not on 8.5 by 11 paper that you've printed at the office. Like,
that's badass.
Yeah. So I think that was a big benefit for us, was that we could demonstrate the game and we could let people have part of it to like try it out themselves. So yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a different world in the sense that like, because I know a number of people who've done like video game Kickstarters, and there it's like, well, that's not work that you do ahead of time. Like, you do enough to show that you're capable of doing the work, and then you tell them the plan. But like with a board game, it's more like, well, yeah, I had to do all the work. Like,
you essentially had to develop a prototype almost before you could ask people to fund even that.
Right.
Or anything
Seems
following
reasonable,
it.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So so we got that was our path, was a little bit more concrete before we got going.
And Ryan, your path is a little unique because, like you said, it started out as an April Fool's joke 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was a tweet from a friend of mine, Steve Kenson, who's done a lot of superhero role-playing games. It ended up being like, why is there not a role-playing game about katanas and trench coats? And like a couple of days later on my blog, I put together some really horrible art with like Spike from Buffy in there and just like really horrible font and like coming someday in your heart or whatever. And then a year later, I worked with 27 people to make a 22-page joke game that was accidentally playable called Katanas and Trenchcoats Episode 1, Welcome to Darkest Vancouver.
Bravo.
How does that happen? How do you make something accidentally playable?
Well, we were focused on making sure that the text was funny. And it turned out that also the dice mechanics mostly worked. Nice. And so that was like, that's neat. People playtesting it say it works. That's quaint. I guess I'll publish this and see what happens. And part of the sort of joke there was, hey, here, LOL's 90s and stuff. And then I donated all the money we got within the first couple months over to Seattle Children's Hospital because I didn't want it to just be like, hey, I'm mocking all of us. It's like a loving homage sort of thing.
Cool.
But people kept asking me for the full-size book. People kept asking me for the print book. And eventually I'm like, okay, well, I think the internet is double dog daring me. So I'm going to double dog dare back.
That's
by
what the internet's
doing
for.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, all right, fine.
That's how Trump did it, by the way. It was just a double dog.
It's all one big dare.
Oh
That's
man.
what I heard.
So I set this out. I kind of effectively had a prototype, but we're redesigning the game to be not just accidentally playable, but actually playable. To be a book that's actually big enough to print and bind and ship. And I'm now working with around 100 writers on that one book.
Wow.
Because, when a game line gets large enough, it becomes, and I say this lovingly, having worked on a bunch of stuff like that, it does eat itself a little bit, and it sort of becomes not necessarily inconsistent if there's a meta plot, but it grows and it gets weird, and you're like, but this and this. Yeah. I want that in one book.
Yeah, right.
I want to create like that entire
5-year
game line effect in one book. So that requires 100 people. About 192 pages.
Cool.
How do you get that many people involved?
They each write 2 pages.
Yeah, well, no, I've been freelancing and working with a lot of people in the indie games and related games world just long enough to where I have a bunch of people I know who I know love the same sort of stuff. So I'm like, hey, you want to write 500 words for this? No, you don't actually need to read the rest of it. Will, I have somebody else who's going to handle that for you. And just ask 70 people that and 30 other people to say, I don't know, you get 1,000 words and 5 people to actually write the rules so that they're not just accidentally playable. And you suddenly have a really huge credit page that you somehow have to fit everyone in.
That sounds fun. Can we get it?
You want in?
Yeah, I think the Kickstarter is live right now.
No, I mean,
We could just throw out some pages.
no, it's done.
Pages.
Yeah.
No.
I could type you out some pages.
I mean, and I'll just glue them into one of the books. It's just like,
Now we're talking.
No, that's called collaboration.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's what that is.
But yeah, and it's because the stuff that I've done for like Dresden Files and Fate Core for Evil Hat were where I really got to play in like a jam band space where it's like, me and 5 friends, and occasionally we like text each other, or like we like okay, we're gonna have a meeting. I'm drinking bourbon, you're drinking tequila. Let's see what we make.
That's the way I do video game development.
Right.
Actually.
I mean, it's okay. So I know that my liver can handle video games. Excellent.
Well, it's about the extended period of time.
Okay. I've done the Gen Con compressed thing too, so I guess I can train up to the extended
Have
time.
you graduated up to the Nyquilata?
I,
We'll talk offline.
all right, yeah.
I will say that one of your partners on one of your products, I won't name which, introduced me to the Nyquilata.
We're gonna definitely talk afterwards.
Which
I
is
just
similar
realized-
to what it sounds like.
It is,
sounds-
and I just realized one of my children actually works here. And I should shut up about the Nyquilata.
Dude, you know her better than that.
Yeah.
I like that Ryan and I are sitting on the opposite sides of the table. I'm like, I did a Kickstarter so I could exert control, and Ryan's like, nah, man, I did a Kickstarter so I could give it to
Well,
That's cool.
throw it away.
Well, I still effectively exert control in that at some point I have to publish something, and I want it to be something that people love. So I do have a bunch of people whose job it is to basically take like what 70 people put together. And I'm like, can you make kind of some sense out of this, but in the way that you and I both know we need to do.
Hash.
So yeah, it's just like my whole vibe with that is the internet double dog dared me, and I want to create something that is totally in the spirit of this thing that the internet keeps wanting to fund. And so we were a day one funder, and it's still going on, and people have not said, no, your idea is stupid. Well, some people have,
Wait
but
a
not,
minute. I bet
but not to the
Kickstarter
point
pays.
where
on the
everyone
internet,
has
so on the
unbacked.
Yeah.
Right. But some of them are your idea is stupid, and I want to buy in.
Yeah.
And those are like a lot of the people that I'm talking with, and it's just great to like after we're done with this, I'm posting an update revealing more writers and other stupid stuff.
Well, see, I think you touched on just now the single greatest thing about doing a Kickstarter for me is you're interacting with your audience, your real audience. The people are actually giving you money, not your hypothetical audience that you hope to sell to one day. People that have already given you money and still want to hang out with you and support you and stuff. I think that's the coolest part of Kickstarter.
Yeah, there's a big difference between the people that are communicating to something that they're supporting than like everywhere else on the internet. 90% of the people that are talking are doing so because they're angry enough to.
Well, that's what the internet is for.
Exactly.
Also, that and porn.
Yeah, those are the two things. It's complaining and porn.
Yeah.
And then sometimes funding video games.
Yes.
When the other two are done.
That's a thin sliver, apparently. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. That's what it is.
Let's
Yeah. I was gonna branch off that if you don't mind.
Oh, please do.
So for me, like coming in with a fully formed thing,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like, this is what it is, this is how it plays. It's gonna be more of exactly this. You know exactly what it is. I can even show you what the like prototype art is gonna look like because we've got it. So when people bought in on ours, it was like, that's what we want. We want that. That's super exciting. But I've seen a lot of times with particularly like video game Kickstarters where people will get in and they'll be like, I have this idea of what I want based on what you've explained.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's cool, but that might not be where we're going. And like that conversation feels like, to me, it could get kind of rough. Like,
May I?
how do you deal with that conversation?
Hold on. Now we're cooking. So for the BattleTech Kickstarter, which was last September/October, BattleTech's been around 30-something years, 33 years, with 200, novels and all this stuff. So people grew up on BattleTech, right? So you could imagine you have 2 BattleTech fans, you get 3 opinions, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just
At minimum.
Every 2 years is a different generation of BattleTech fans.
It's interesting. And so, when we launched our Kickstarter, we were very clear, this is the game we're making, right? And yet you go onto the forums, the Kickstarter forums suck my ass, but the Kickstarter comments page, right? And it's funny, the guy who runs the Kickstarter video game or the game section was just at our studio the other day. He happened to be in town. Like, by the way, your comments page still sucks my ass. But anyway, so you get on the comments page and it's just, it was just insane, right? If you could imagine, because we had a lot of backers within the first hour of the Kickstarter who were waiting, and the comments were flying fast and furious, and everybody wants these different games. And it was my job to just get on and sort of just be, the voice and just go, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're not doing. And it was my job to say no for 30 days.
Right.
Right. but you can say no in a very positive and constructive way. And actually, in my experience, you get respect through saying no. I said yes on that first Kickstarter, which worked, but almost killed the studio. So you don't get respect from your studio. But from the audience, what was great was explaining why. And so I would stay on the Kickstarter comments page and watch them just go by and never be able to retrieve again until midnight, 1 a.m, sort of using that opportunity to explain how video games are made in a way. Mm-hmm. It's like, here's why the answer is no. And what happened then is, then I'd go to bed and those people would tell the next wave of people, like from Europe who were coming on, here's why it's no, and collecting those answers and helping to share it. So it became less of a quote-unquote burden as time went on. Mm-hmm. But you got to get out there. Yeah.
And that's also, like you said, you have an opportunity to resell it. Every time somebody's like, should you do this? You have an opportunity to say, no, we're doing this, and here's why. Like you said, you can make it more appealing every time you justify it.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah.
And if not that, then the people who are really looking for this completely different thing know before their money's taken, oh, this is not the thing for me. And you want those people to be able to get out before they're angry about having paid for something.
Yeah.
Like I've had a couple of comments where the comment thread is like, hey, you've described this thing, but what about this? I'm like, no. Or I've had my co-pilot on this. When I was at Emerald City, I just texted him saying, I don't have enough bandwidth on my phone at Emerald City Comic-Con to deal with this. Can you tell these people no? And he like, here's no, here's why. I had like one person, on back, and I'm like, cool, it's not for you. And I want you to not be an angry fan whose money can't be like taken back or whatever.
Yeah,
I want you to be
deal.
able to get out.
This is a chance, I've been making video games for a long time, and in the old days, especially in packaged products, you'd work for years before you'd announce the game, right? And only then to find out that people didn't want it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so Kickstarter gives you this opportunity, just like you were saying. It's like, these people actually want your game, and it's a great way to make a video game. Knowing that there's somebody on the other side that's going to buy it, that's going to play. Oh, they've already bought it. They're going to play it.
Right.
And so that's very, very reassuring, too.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, like, developing in the open like that creates
in a fishbowl.
Yeah, it's interesting because you create so it's great because people get to see what you're doing, but it also creates, especially if you're, like, just doing, like, the one-person shop, and just because I have 100 writers doesn't mean I'm not really a one-person shop handling all of the business logistics. It creates a workload on top of community management, and basically, like, it is a degree more work than people think it is to say post updates like every week after the Kickstarter's done, because they're looking for some sort of engagement where our response is like, still working, we don't have anything to show you right now. And it's sort of, I don't know, it's just interesting, the community engagement level that is increased beyond, hey, we made a game and now we're revealing the game
to you.
Well,
here, 2:00 today on this station, we're doing a BattleTech Q&A, right? So yeah, absolutely. It's that thing that just keeps propagating.
Do you find that makes you make better games, that the outreach with the community is giving you ideas you wouldn't have had, or is it you're finding that the audience is more excited about the game that you were going to make in the first place?
The hard thing for us, at least for me, is what you're doing. It's kind of ass backwards, because without Kickstarter, you make a game and you come up with a feature set, and then you prototype and test that feature, and you go, you know what, screw that. That's just out. Right. And with Kickstarter, well, I committed to that feature. We have to make it work, because I don't want to go to the audience saying, hey, by the way, that thing that I told you about and that you funded us for, we're not doing. So, it, in a way, from a development point of view, it's kind of a straitjacket, right? And so you have to watch your commitments, at least on a project like of the scope of a BattleTech one.
I think that in a way, like you were saying about that no means no period. In a way, it's. I mean, sure, the ideas are fine and the interaction is fine, but what comes down to is it comes down to them helping you to make your design doc at the beginning. It's basically like, yes, I am going to do that. Thank you for asking. We'll make sure to do that. And it'll be like, no, I'm not doing that. And thank you for making sure that I don't do that. Like, yeah, I mean, like when it comes to design, the design doc is always this thing where it's a little squishy. And so particularly during that phase when people are entertaining the like, do I want your product? Will it be this thing? It can help you to harden that even before like you get going. So it's almost less about like, 6 months later, they're like, make sure to add lasers. And you're like, shut up. Like, it's more about that thing at the beginning where they're like, but will it include this? And you're like, it won't. And thank you for making sure I clarify that within the scope.
Right.
Let's talk about that design document and specifically like stretch goals. How do you decide what has to be in the game and what gets to be an auxiliary thing if you can? And how do you decide how many stretch goals to put, and how do you go about meeting them, these things that you weren't sure you were going to do in the first place?
I did a Kickstarter with a friend of mine who talked me into publishing it through him because I was also getting married that year, and my wife didn't want me to run a Kickstarter while getting married. By the way, which is probably
like a smart person.
Yeah, no, probably like the best advice is if you're getting married, also do not run a Kickstarter during then. Just being a part of it was pretty harrowing. Called Backstory Cards, which is a role-playing game sort of supplement device that creates backstory cards between other characters and the world.
Ooh, you look like
Oh
a
my
fan.
God, though, now what I really want to do is I really want when people are getting married, them to do like a Kickstarter and here are the things that we want for our wedding. And then like,
So they're actually
Great.
those things exist, and we did actually deal with that.
Excellent.
There are honeymoon registries, and we basically funded our honeymoon from a honeymoon registry. It was
Nice.
pretty cool.
I just love the idea of like the stretch goals. It'd be like, if you guys keep donating, we can get a table. Like,
Yeah, I'm. All right, so if I get married again, something went wrong first.
You
but-
get to choose the first dance.
The higher the funding, the better the dinner you get at our wedding.
Right.
there we go.
But yeah, it's now on Indiegogo. But with that, we had planned out like, okay, the core thing is this. We know that we can get it printed through our printer for this much. We know the shipping's this much. And I don't know, here's like 7 stretch goals at like reasonable prices, except one that we forgot didn't exist. So as soon as that stretch goal was hit, which was like what is the stretch goal for 15,000? Like, yeah, it was going to be for more art, but our thing doesn't have art. I'm like, oh, so we need to come up with something so you can write an update right now. But for the most part, it was like little tiny slivers of content that we felt that we could package in like $1,000 or $2,000 increments. As it started at like 5, I think was the goal, and then like 750, stuff like that. We sort of layer on top. But it's for me, it's about modest goals. And what I'm doing right now on Katanas and Trenchcoats actually has very little to do with money and entirely to do with silly community engagement, because what I want out of that project isn't to somehow become rich. In fact, I'm a role-playing game designer, so being rich is not an aspiration of mine at all.
It shouldn't be. So
No.
Good job.
So no, I've already solved that problem.
Achieved.
Achievement is-
Unlocked, yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. It's sort of a negative unlocked. I'm just never going to hit this thing.
You know
so
what?
let's
But
not
the
bother.
self-realization
Yeah.
is its own reward.
Do you think?
Question mark?
See, I like the question mark at the end of that. I know how to solve that, by the way.
Listen, kids, there's nothing better than realizing your limitations.
And then drinking them away. Drink to forget. Actually, my day job, I do actually use drink to forget as my motto.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
You want to tell us what your day job is?
I'm a technical writer, so it's drink to forget.
My day job is this shit. So.
Yeah. It's
Enjoy
running
that.
a Kickstarter while having an actual day job with actual demands and actual like, oh, by the way, also in April, at the end of April, you need to have this big deliverable. So have fun with that. Oh, that was not planned for.
Well,
So-
that mirrors the Shadowrun Returns Kickstarter. We were talking about that earlier, where we were in crunch mode for another
Yeah.
game, right? Working till midnight, and then at midnight, it's like, all right, so what do we do on the Kickstarter tomorrow? And so that's when our strategery meeting would start in the stairwell, because there was no room to talk in the closet. So.
Good times.
Midnight in the stairwell looks like a drug deal.
Midnight
It's
in
just a
the
strategy
stairwell.
meeting for a Kickstarter video game.
I mean, that's also seems like a really great place to just like set up a camera and to do like live Q&As on there too.
We almost did.
Yeah.
It came real close.
Sir Lucien, we are absolutely taking questions. Go ahead and ask, and we'll interject them. So, Always taking questions here on Easter eggs.
Yeah, for tabletop, it was a little different because with our game, our stretch goals could basically be the things that would be enabled by us increasing our number of units and thereby decreasing our unit cost. So like it was pretty straightforward ahead of time that we could be like, well, this is how much it's going to cost at 2,500 copies. It'll cost way less per unit at 5,000 copies. So if people keep going, then we can be like, well, now we can do nicer cards and it'll cost less. Or now we can do, gold foil stamping. So like in the end, like the overfunding for us didn't change how much we were going to spend per unit. It was just that now we could afford more things at that price.
Right, the production based as opposed to content based.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did do one content-based thing, which ended up being kind of a headache. It was sort of like, I promised to come up with a whole new game mode. And then I was like, oh, man, now I have to playtest that. And like, why did I do it? And just, I was in the good spot. My thing was done, and then I made it undone. And like, that was this close.
I had a stretch goal for Shadowrun Hong Kong back in January, February of last year. And, it had performed really well. And they're like, if you hit $1 million, what's your stretch goal going to be? I'm like, I didn't think we'd do this well, so now what? Because it was really, really well planned up to a point. And I planned for success. I just didn't plan for that. And so got together with the team and like, all right, we do a mini campaign. Yeah, that sounds really cool. Will that work? Yeah, that'll work. And it's like, yeah, it'll work. But of course, it's like, oh, we're going to add 4 or 5 hours of content. What I meant was 6 to 8 hours of content. Right. And just, we're morons.
The $1 million, my wife vetoed the $1 million goal for my $10,000 campaign, which is what I would get a large tattoo of one of the immortal houses from the game on me in a very prominent way.
Why not?
And a mil
I don't
five,
think you need $1 million to do that.
And I was hoping like, okay, well, $1 million, I can sell you on this, right?
Yeah.
Well, not you. Yeah. I mean, my wife.
Yeah, but
other people.
But I am
yes.
sold.
Now a mil 5 is at some point I will also have it removed. That will be on Periscope.
Yeah.
And I was talking with my friend Molly Lewis. Like, she'll serenade the tattoo removal process. She's like, I would do that for an obscene amount of money. I'm like, well, then I'll make these 2 stretch goals. And my wife's like, I don't even want you to joke about those. So I'm allowed to joke about those in an interview, but I'm not allowed to actually put that on the page.
I think you married right?
Yeah, no, I did. In a lot of ways, I married. I mean, in no way did I marry wrong, but in a lot of ways, I can enumerate the ways in which I married right, and those are 2 of them.
That seems really wise that you're able to also.
Yeah. Well, it's well, she also enumerates 2. That
oh, yeah?
Like, well, it's more like, oh, by the way, and it's never in like a mean way, but it's like, oh, right, this is why I keep marrying you. This is why we keep doing this
keep
thing.
Marrying you.
Really?
It's a good way to look at it. You make a choice every year or day. It's not just, I did this thing once.
Right.
Let's grab a question from the chat here. Have any of you guys ever failed a Kickstarter, and what did you take away from a failed Kickstarter? Sounds like you all have the opposite problem where you don't know how to handle how much interest you're getting.
Yeah, haven't failed Kickstarter.
Almost. We did a Kickstarter for a game called Golem Arcana. And what did we have? I think it was a $500,000 goal. And we did $100,000 the first day with this pent-up demand. We're like, woo! But it didn't smell right. And then the next day was crickets. Went from $100,000 to like $3,000, $3,000.
The lull.
Yeah. Well, the lull happened day 2.
Ooh,
right?
Yeah.
Because the lull you plan for, it's a reverse bell curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does this thing. And you just expect that and you plan for it. And actually that lull in the middle is a real positive thing if you play it right. Because if you're, just to get all businessy for a minute, in the middle there, you're going to be getting this, set amount of money kind of every day. And you're not doing much and you're not expected to do much. So if you just stretch that out, you're just going to be getting incrementally more. And that's why our last Kickstarter lasted like 35 days or something like that. That was one of the reasons. Like, just let that lull happen. That's okay. And don't feel bad about it.
A steady stream of income.
Yeah. And I'll take it. I'm in video games. The idea
that's all
that there's
we're
a steady
looking for,
stream
right?
of income. Yeah, it's like, could we please just fund this thing? So anyway, but yeah, it just went crickets. And what we did was Brian Poole, the producer of Golem Arcana, got together what we called the Knights of Aretsu Council. And these were superfan backers who were willing to help us figure out what to do to the Kickstarter to sort of reignite it. And we worked very hard with them, collaborating with them, and we just started, instead of putting out Kickstarter updates every 3 days the way we thought, it was pretty much every day. We would have a different Kickstarter update, and there was something going on. And we called it a knife fight. It's like, all right, well, we're in a knife fight. That's that. It's not Shadowrun Returns where people are like, take my money. It's like, why should you have my money? Okay, you're credible, but this idea is kind of weird.
Still got to sell them on it. You can't just
sell hard.
be a thing.
We had to sell hard.
Basically, because I've never failed a Kickstarter, but I've worked with a number of people like as an advisor to say like, all right, you're gonna kickstart, and a couple of them have gone down, and almost every time it's basically comes back to that. It's like, is it the idea, or do we just need to sell harder? Mm-hmm. Do we need to gather more people? Do we need to convince them more? Like what is the aspect of selling that needs to be upped?
But here's the interesting thing in that case, and back to what you were saying earlier about it's a litmus test for does the audience want it. Sure. We got enough to hit funding, right? We got like $5.25, right? $525,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but it, all up, it's really not. And so because we didn't light the world on fire, in a way, it would have been better to like pull the plug before the Kickstarter ended.
I've had a couple friends who have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we actually had this sort of drop dead, sort of go no go, point in there. Was like, all right, if we're tracking here and not here, we should probably pull the plug.
Yeah.
And we came to it and like, yeah, but I don't like to lose.
But that's a danger, man.
Of course, it's a danger. It's stupid. It's ego driven.
There are a lot of Kickstarters out there, and we're starting to see more now, particularly from like big names, where they're like, and the Kickstarter will be part of the money, and it's like, oh man, I just never. When people asked, they were like, how did you come up with the goal of $12,000? And I'm like, well, I looked at how much I actually needed, and I added half. Like, literally, I did not, there was no way whatsoever that I was going to go into it anywhere near the point where it was like, this isn't worth my time.
Really?
The other way.
Really?
I looked at how much I needed and decided that nothing sells like success. So the sooner that you fund, the sooner people are confident.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, how much am I willing to put up of my own money to get this there?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
That much minus this amount for this base concept is my goal.
Yep.
But at the same time, you don't want to undersell. I'm like, $10,000, I can totally do this.
Right. Not
Not even a problem. We've already budgeted out and made sure we can do this. And I was like, do I go underneath? And some friends were like, no, your thing is a 5-digit project. You should just respect that. Don't try to undersell yourself. So it is possible to say, oh, maybe for $5,000, I can put up even more of my own money to do this, which is like not saying that's a smart idea, but your goal indicates how much confidence you have in your project in some degree.
In some degree.
And
But-
it's also your budget too, but it's like,
it's a lot of things, and I think you touched on a really sort of hairy subject because nobody understands how much a video game costs to make.
That is true.
Right? Including us.
right.
But all right, we finally got it to the point where it's like, oh, I see, we've been doing it completely wrong. But
big
but nobody
companies-
really understands. Yeah,
Big companies just had enough success that they didn't have to figure it out.
thank you. Yes.
exactly.
Wrong but survivable success is not a horrible thing, though.
Yeah.
But when you succeed, and I got this from a dozen years at Microsoft. It's like, oh, this Windows thing. Wow, we must be geniuses. And now everything they touch, they think they're God. And actually, no, you were in the right place at the right time.
Right.
And you took what Steve Jobs did and did a better job, or did a more ubiquitous, cheaper job with it. Anyway, but the point is that, first of all, the one thing that you said that I want to key off of, because it pisses me off, is not that you do. You seem like a really nice guy.
No, but I mean, wait till you get to know me.
It's this idea that people want to back a winner, right? Which is not what Kickstarter is for in my mind. It's you're trying to help somebody realize their vision and and bring it to whatever medium it is.
Specifically the kind of people who can't afford to make a game for 4 years
Yeah, right.
and then show it to you.
Exactly. And so the idea that I'm going to wait until this thing funds and then throw in my funding is, again, ass backwards. It should be, do it so that it can succeed.
Well, the reason I also did that is that I'm willing to show that I've got skin in the game. I don't need I mean, it's like,
No, I respect
this is what
your
I
decision.
need. Yeah.
It's just the mentality.
Yeah.
Because it's so bizarre. I'm not going to throw in money until I know it's going to succeed.
Well,
Well,
there-
if you
there's
throw in
both-
your money,
right.
it may succeed.
Right.
Right.
A lot of people like to be on the ground floor of something, though. It's part of it. It's exciting to be part of the grassroots movement, but people don't like to lose.
Yeah.
So you go out to Kickstarter, you find the thing that's 98% there, and you're like, I was part of it.
Well, and the other thing is they don't want to commit money to your Kickstarter because they might want to commit it to a different Kickstarter.
Right.
When you haven't committed it, you could take it out at any time until the funding day and they actually charge your credit card. It's a pledge. It's like the Jerry Lewis telethon,
Well, for me, and this is like, now we're getting into also sort of that, like, what do we do personally, right? Because you guys have probably backed a number yourself. I've got my we're going to discuss publicly number of Kickstarters I've backed.
I will tell you this. I went and did a count last year, and apparently I've backed 4 digits worth of money for Kickstarters, and that's why my wife is like, yeah, so you did that. So next year, I'm like, yeah,
Right.
apparently I did that.
Gonna ramp it back.
Gonna
I'm
ramp
not
it
allowed
back.
to have a credit card, so.
But the thing for me is that Kickstarter is that space where if I don't back it, it might not exist, right? Like that's a real feeling for me. And whenever I encounter a Kickstarter that I'm like, you know what, it's probably going to exist without me. That is a bummer. Like
Oh, I
that's the
get
thing
it.
that I'll look at it and I'll be like, yeah, but you could make this, you don't need me. Like
Well, there's an interesting blend now between that and what you were saying before about putting your own money in and the skin in the game.
Right.
So for that BattleTech Kickstarter, one of the questions we were going to get, and we knew it proactively, was why are you back on Kickstarter a 4th time? You've done 3 successful Kickstarters. Your games have come out. They've reviewed well. You've
probably sold some.
We may have sold a couple, but again, I'm wearing this shirt, so, extrapolate. But what we did was we said, we are making a game. We're making a skirmish mode BattleTech game. We're paying for it ourselves, right? That's our skin in the game. And it's over $1 million, right, that we're putting in on this. But we want to add X number of features to that, and you're funding each of those. And then if we get to this tier, that unlocks the single-player story mode. And then if you back it all the way up to here, it's an open-ended campaign mode. And then if you back it all the way up to, I don't know, $2.5 million, something like that. Yeah, I think it was $2.5 million. We'll add PvP multiplayer. And so we were phasing up the scope of the game in very sort of modular ways, right, while adding little features along the way. So we did the skin in the game thing, and that's why our initial goal was some ridiculously small number, like maybe ridiculously small for a video game,
Right.
From a scale of like $250,000 or something, which we got like in 5 minutes.
So let me ask this question, and we're all friends here, and we've all touched one another. So like,
Wait.
Hang on. Let's.
there we go. Scott, you can. There you go. So this is
Warm. I like that.
so this is not meant to
Next
be
to you for an
accusatory.
hour.
This is a question that I generally have like about the Kickstarter ecosystem and about the way that it's been maturing. Is that both of you have done Kickstarters now where you've had some portion of skin in the game, and therefore the goal is not the actual production cost of the thing. So there's a question that's sort of looming about the crowdfunding sphere right now, which is, does this give people an inaccurate idea of how much it takes to get something off the ground? Like, does this contribute to people thinking that, like, it costs less for this to really happen than it really does?
I think it depends on how much you're willing to disclose about or how transparent you are. Fred Hicks over at Evil Hat is pretty transparent about all sorts of budgeting regarding game books. And so if you basically follow the sort of discussions in that realm, it's a lot easier to understand, okay, this means this, and if you add on international shipping, dear God, it means this, and all sorts of elements of like this, Kickstarter's weird because it's also your units shift, so you can't tell exactly how much you may or may not get of, like, if you happen to add another physical reward, but only 5 people order it, and you have to buy in units of 100. That's so there's a lot of right. There's a lot of weird worst case success planning and calculus that basically gets involved. So it's a hard conversation to have. Like, here's how much things cost, except it can cost totally different depending on your individual set of math.
Sure.
But I think it does. I think it can make people think that things may cost sort of weird, but I think it's more so on the individual levels. Like, this PDF costs X amount, but this other person sells it for Y amount. Why aren't you doing that? Those, I think, are the different things where people actually get a weird sense of how much things do or don't cost.
Right.
I think nobody understands how much video games cost,
So-
and therefore screw it.
Right.
Right? I mean, are we adding to that misery? Maybe. But I don't think it matters. I think that would be tilting.
Nobody really knows how much anything in games costs. It's just it's just this thing where you know how much the thing is on the shelf.
Yeah.
You don't really know anything beyond that.
There's a lot to be said about it. I think a lot of people go on the internet aren't thinking like, does this game really need $1 million to be funded? They're just thinking, am I willing to put my 20 in?
Yeah.
They're not. It's not necessarily entering into everybody's thought process of, is this pitch realistic? Because they're not seeding 20% of the whole game.
Not everybody.
Not
Thank
everybody,
goodness.
but there's this thing called Reddit, and certainly some.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's one of the problems with the internet, where, like you say, on Reddit, you can get 3,000 people to vote yes on something, and those 3,000 people have defined the way the internet thinks about it.
But it can become one of those things where people ask you about the money and about what's going on, and that becomes one of the many conversations that you have with the community during and post funding.
I'm going to ask one quick question that we got out of the chat earlier, and that was, why Kickstarter, not other things like Indiegogo or GoFundMe? Was it just because that was kind of the first one, or they have better goals, or?
I went there because that's where the people were. Like, that was...
It's the one people are talking about. It's got
was-
the exposure.
Exactly. It was at a time when, which for us was a year and a half ago now, when, like, board game Kickstarters were hot. So, like, that's where we went.
We're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, we are running out of time. So we've got to get out of here. I'd want to, one more time, tell us where we can find your Kickstarter and where we can help fund it.
You can find the Kickstarter at somanykatanas.com/Kickstarter. And it's $15 for the PDF, and for things that are not the PDF, it is more money, not less. And do that if you love the dream of the 90s.
Oh, and give us your Twitter handle, too.
My Twitter handle is my name, at Ryan Macklin, Macklin. And feel free to tweet at me stupid pictures of yourselves as immortals, and that actually is what I use to unlock stretch goals in the campaign.
And the mods post our Twitter handles frequently throughout the chat, so you can follow those links. Matt, you could find Bring Your Own Book online. That's right.
That is true. So bringyourownbook.com is where you can find all the information about Bring Your Own Book that you need. The Kickstarter edition finally shipped and is currently on the water from our factory in China. So we'll be fulfilling probably in the next couple of weeks, which is really exciting. We also got picked up by a publisher. So apparently you can get the publisher's version of the game. Somebody told me they saw it in Barnes & Noble yesterday. So, like, this is all very exciting. It's all happening very quickly.
Get some books, too, to play with.
Yeah, also. But if you want my copy, we had to take down pre-orders because we're in the middle of fulfillment right now, but we'll have them back up at bringyourownbook.com in no time.
And Mitch, you've working on some games?
Yeah, we got a few. So we've got the Shadowrun series. That would be Shadowrun Return, Shadowrun Dragonfall Director's Cut, and Shadowrun Hong Kong Extended Edition, all available on Steam and Humble Stores and goodoldgamesgog.com. You can get those. We have Necropolis, which is a third-person action game, sort of like Dark Souls meets a roguelike, like Spelunky. What if they had a baby and it was really pretty? That's coming to Steam and PlayStation 4 and Xbox One this summer. And then that whole BattleTech thing, that's next year. So, and BattleTech forums, battletechgame.com, and look for us on Steam.
All right. Thank you guys all for coming on. As always, I'm Scott Shuken. This has been Easter Eggs. Stick around for Rabbit Stew up next right here on Hyper RPG.